Well, you have coached all athletes at every level. What are some universal truths of rowing that you find yourself teaching no matter what age or experience that you coach?
Yeah, the boat doesn't know what you look like. It doesn't know if you're short, if you're tall, if you're tan, if you're pale, if you're blonde, if you're brown-eyed. The boat doesn't know.
Mhm.
All the boat knows is, are the oars going in here? Are they coming out here? That's it. So anybody that I have come through a boathouse that I've worked with, rowing's not natural. It's something that's learned. So it's going to be hard to break out of what is natural to you. So give yourself grace. You showed up. And then same thing too. Try it. Have fun. It's not going to be perfect. I was like, you're going to get wet. You're going to get splashed, whatever it
You're
may
gonna
be.
get wet. You're gonna
Yeah.
get wet. Greetings and welcome to the Elevated Flow podcast. I'm your host, Coach Flo, aka the Black Rowing Queen. The Elevated Flow podcast spotlights elite and everyday female athletes over 40, sharing how they elevate their game and their flow in sports, wellness, and life. These are powerful stories of strength, resilience, wisdom, and inspiration to help women stay active, age strong, and pass the torch to the next generation. Today, I have a special guest with me. Please help me welcome Miss Tamara Clayton.
Yay.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me this morning.
Thank you so much for being here. Well, let me give you a formal introduction. Miss Tamara Clayton is the inaugural head coach of Xavier University of Louisiana's rowing program, bringing over 2 decades of experience in the sport. She began rowing in 2003, started coaching in 2014, and has been helping athletes find their rhythm and sometimes their water bottles ever since. At Xavier, Tamara focuses on building confident, disciplined, and resilient athletes. She emphasizes fundamentals, teamwork, and accountability while creating an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome, supported, and seen. A strong advocate for DEI in rowing, Tamara is committed to expanding access and representation in a sport that hasn't always made space for everyone. She believes in tough practices, honest communication, and celebrating each step forward, whether it's a cleaner catch or a breakthrough moment in team culture. As the inaugural head coach of the first HBCU Coed rowing team in the nation, Tamara is honored to help build a legacy at Xavier, one defined by history, representation, and a whole lot of firsts. She's been coaching since 2014 and has coached all levels. She has also been a U.S. rowing regatta announcer. Prior to her current position as head coach at Xavier, she worked in operations for Howmet Aerospace, Inc. in Pennsylvania. They are the leading global provider of advanced engineered solutions for aerospace and transportation industries. She is an educator and received her degree from Oklahoma University. She says DEI is her DNA. Welcome, Miss Tamara.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's jump right in. Wow, the inaugural head coach of the first co-ed rowing program at an HBCU. How does that feel?
Well, I didn't get the ball rolling. I would be amiss if I didn't give kudos to those that actually got the ball going. Many people, took many hands, and a lot of the individuals outside of Beth Manley, who's a professor here, she was the advisor and the sponsor for the club team.
Right.
But every single Black Olympian in the rowing spectrum has been here, has been giving advice to them. There's been coaches across the nation. Any other sport, it would be equivalent of having like Kobe Bryant come and coach a lesson, and coach a practice. We have big people that have come and paved the way for these individuals. So for me to come in now after they did most, if not all the hard work, I wouldn't be here without them. So my job is just to expand it and grow it and keep the torch going.
Well, that is so awesome. I was so excited when I saw Beth at a conference last year, and she was asking, like, do you know somebody that would like to be a head coach at Xavier? And I was like, I ask around, but, and that's why when we recently talked, I was like, well, what is it like living in New Orleans, Because, I have friends that have actually, my cousin, like I told you earlier, is a graduate of alumni of Xavier. So, I've heard
Really?
different things about being Xavier. So, and being in New Orleans. But when I heard that you were the head coach, I was so excited. Like, oh my God, she stepped up. And so I truly believe that they are blessed to have you. And that's awesome. I have seen some pictures of different Olympians and Arshay Cooper and different people that have come down and coached. And I would love to come and visit. But I know that they built the foundation, but what has it been like working with these athletes and really trying to develop them, being that, rowing is a new sport for them?
Yeah, majority of the team, I want to say every single one of them actually never knew what rowing was until they tried out for the club team. Coming from club and this being our inaugural as like a varsity level sport, varsity is giving us opportunity to have scholarships.
Wow.
So we recruited 2 high school gentlemen with high school experience. So bringing them in has also helped those individuals that transition from the club to varsity, where they had optional practices 3 times a week to now they practice 5 to 6 times a week and it's mandatory. But on the flip side, we're offering them tuition assistance, housing assistance, food assistance. But without those gentlemen coming from high school, it would also be hard for me to, I didn't want to come in and boom, 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 boom. I wanted to slowly roll in from a club expectations to varsity. So I didn't want the workouts necessarily to be too difficult right off the bat and lose everybody because I didn't know the demographics here. I didn't know like the type of culture. Is it going to be hard for me to get any new athletes on the team? But I wasn't even going to do any walk-on or tryouts this fall. I had 27 students reach me. They emailed me. And before I even said anything, they're like, what's this rowing? Out of those 27, a handful of them did it in high school or middle school. So just to have that connection, I wasn't worried that we wouldn't have the heads and the hands and the bodies here. So we're still, like this whole semester has been a grace period, just making sure that they're learning. Now they have required study hall hours. Now they have required service hours. Now there's so many more requirements and expectations coming from a club to a varsity. So this whole semester has been just evolution of growth for them. And then on my side, getting used to the university and their standards and their culture here on campus.
So what division does the varsity team fall into as far as like the college level?
If you're listening right now and you're thinking, Coach Flo, I know I need to get moving, but I don't know where to start. Or you've been moving, but you feel stuck. Maybe you hit a plateau. This message is for you. I created a 21-day Get Active, Stay Active challenge just for women like you. It's simple, it doesn't take much time, and it's doable even if you can only work out at home. This challenge is designed not only to help you build strength and momentum, it's designed to build confidence and consistency without feeling overwhelmed. Every day, you'll get clear guidance and small, powerful steps that add up to big results. By the end of the 21 days, you'll not only feel stronger, you'll know exactly how to keep going. So if you're ready to take that step, join me. Click the link in the description to join the challenge. Your future self will thank you for it. Now let's get back to the episode.
We are NAIA conference.
Okay.
So it's on the smaller end, but in terms of rowing, there's not a specific conference for rowing in NAIA.
Okay.
We would go to ACRAs in the spring if we do compete on a national level, the ACRAs.
Okay. And where is that located?
It's the American Collegiate Rowing Association. So you'll see smaller programs like non-Ivy Leagues go, clubs teams go. And this year it's in Chattanooga or Oak Ridge, Tennessee. One of those 2 Tennessee cities.
Okay. So what was the importance of it going from club to, what did you say this?
Like varsity
A
level.
varsity club, because it was a club at the university. What was the importance of doing that, making that transition?
Well, just having it as a club for female was the first ever HBCU.
Okay.
The only other history in HBCU was Howard, I believe in the 60s. The men's team had a program for a time and then just dissolved and nothing ever came back on any HBCU. So to have the club going with women was a big deal. And then we got men interested, and then attendance
Mm.
growing. And to provide them the opportunity just to have tuition assistance to travel so it's not on their dime, gear, all those things where they're seeing all the other sports like highlighted on campus. I wanted to give them that opportunity because they were doing big things.
Right.
So through the lottery system, well, not a lottery system, but the university, we were one of 2 sports, I believe, that joined as a varsity, transitioning from club to varsity. So there was a whole thing that they're looking at to see how it impacts the student population. How is it going to represent the university? How are we going to compete
Oh.
on a national level? And they believe rowing was ready.
Wow.
So,
That is
yeah.
so impactful. I love it because I went to an HBCU. I went to Fisk University in Nashville, and I have been talking to the athletic director and different people about bringing rowing to Fisk. So just to hear that, it's really like, okay, it's possible. Of course, it probably would need to start with a club, but I know that there are a couple of clubs in the community clubs or private rowing clubs in Nashville that they could connect with. So, I
Mhm.
mean, there's water. When there's water,
Yeah.
you can have a rowing club. That really inspires me, and and I will say there is one other college. It starts with a W, but I don't remember that had a rowing club, HBCU as well.
Oh,
It's
okay.
an all
I'll have
female.
to look it up
I
too.
wish I
Yeah.
remembered off the top of my head, but I don't. But anyway, so moving on. So you bring 20 years of experience rowing. And in the rowing community, we always say, what's your rowing story? How did you find
Yeah.
rowing? Tell us well, you know what? Before you do that, let me ask you this. What age were you when you first started playing sports? Not rowing, just sports in
Yeah.
general.
Kindergarten. My parents put me in tennis lessons.
Okay.
Like the tennis ball with a string and you hit it like yeah.
Right.
So I did tennis and I went all the way through and I was doing tennis and rowing at the same time in 8th grade and my parents were like, "Nope, pick one," type of thing.
Right, right,
So
right.
and then just my mom being a taxi going everywhere. So I picked rowing out of tennis.
Okay.
But going off of that, the main reason why I picked it, my dad is one of those fathers that gets kicked out of basketball games because he's louder than the refs. Like my mom makes him sit on the visitor side. We're like, we're not related to this gentleman.
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons why I never did traditional sports in the sense of basketball or soccer or any like high school team sport.
Right, that is so
And I did
funny.
tennis. Yeah, and tennis, you have to be quiet. So I was like, "This is
Right.
perfect," right? And our neighbor at the time was the University of Tulsa's men's basketball coach.
Mhm.
And that year, I believe they went to the Final Four. So it was a huge thing on campus. And they had a highlight for women's, like in sports day. They were highlighting all their women's sports on campus. And they had a boat in the hallway, like around the arena, the basketball
Oh,
arena. And I was like, "What is this thing? This is so cool." I mean, we'd go fishing with my dad, and they're like, "That's not a fishing boat." But I mean, I saw a table with candy, and they told me, "If you hop on the rowing machine, we'll give you some candy." At middle school, I want that lollipop. And that year, they had just started a youth program through out of the University of Tulsa's boathouse. And I was too young. I had to be, I believe, 13, and I was 12.
mm. Okay.
So, this was in April or, like, in the spring, whenever, like, the Women's Sports Day is.
Okay.
And come fall, my birthday's in October, my mom was like, "Hey, you still interested in that rowing thing?" Because there was one, I believe she was a sophomore at TU, um, she was always like, "Hey, you need to come out." And I would see her in passing, "Hey, have you thought about joining the youth program?" And that student athlete really encouraged me to keep going. So, I showed up. And my dad, of course, Tamara beats all the men in arm wrestling, thinking it's an upper body type
Right, right,
sport.
right.
Like my first 2K, I showed up on a 2K day because it was October. And I think I did like a 10:30, like just going in there in middle school.
Oh, middle school.
Yeah. I stuck with it because I couldn't hear my dad from the shore and he knew nothing about rowing.
Wow.
So I was like, this is amazing. And then I got to travel. I went to a small private school. This was a city club sport. So all the public schools were in there and just
Mm,
branching out and just popping like my private school bubble. I used to be really introverted, and
mm.
people talk to me now and they're like, you don't stop talking. So I say that like I blossomed, and like my horizons, my viewpoint was all expanded. I wouldn't have been so sheltered if I didn't branch out and join rowing.
Okay. That's awesome. That is so awesome. So, what is your nationality? What's your background?
Yeah. My dad is Scottish, and part of his mother's side, I believe, is from Malta. So there's a lot of arguments of where Malta falls into.
Okay.
But when they immigrated, she was Maltese, and she married a Scottish man. And then my mom's side, oh, when I did the DNA, I believe I'm 40 to 50% indigenous Mexico. So
Oh,
there's a tribe in central Mexico, and that's where my mom's side's from. So my dad almost glows in the dark and has green eyes, and my mom's all the dark features with the dark hair, tan skin. So,
interesting. So, definitely
mhm.
not no rowing and from where your family is from or
Oh no, my
background.
mom doesn't know how to swim. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that's what made her nervous too, because she couldn't. She's like, if how do you know how to swim? Are you good? I had family friends that taught me how to swim probably like the year before. So I
Okay.
had just minimal, like I knew how to float, I knew how to doggy pedal, and that was about it. But I eventually got more comfortable in the water too because of rowing.
Okay. So you didn't let that stop you. That's good.
Yeah.
So I read in your bio that you're in education. Did you
hmm
teach prior to going into what is your degree in?
My degree's in health and exercise science.
Okay.
And then I continued it with occupational therapy. So pursuing a coaching career for me, I was injured in college.
Mm,
And when you're on a D1 level and that's like your life, right? It was taken from me without my decision, like my athleticism.
wow.
So I kind of got a little bit depressed through that time because it wasn't a gradual like takeaway. It was just boom, done. And I was dismissed from the rowing team. So it was a
Wow.
lot of like uncertainty at that time. But Oklahoma City was just developing. And if you've seen it, like there's lots going on there with all those boathouses. And one of the coaches invited me and was saying, hey, I can use some help, volunteer coaching. It's like, I don't wanna coach. That's, like, the last thing I wanna do, but they were like, "It'd be good for you." So, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go try this." I needed service hours anyways, to be on the honor roll and whatnot, so I went out there to volunteer, and I haven't looked back. I
Wow.
finished my degree. I can use some of that same info throughout coaching, but it also is something too, like, coaching, depending on what level you're on, isn't sustainable as the only livable wage to have.
Right.
So to have the other option as a fallback when needed is something good and something that I always stay on top of. Any type of science or fitness, it's always evolving. So it's always important to stay on top of it as well.
That's awesome. So how did you get into the aerospace space?
Yeah. So, it's completely like so with the recent administration and like federal cuts with different programs with DEI, the
Mhm.
program that I was coaching with, the funding just pretty much evaporated and it would have had to become a pay to play. And that was completely different structure of what the program was designed for.
Right.
And with that, I lost my benefits through the
Mhm.
business. I lost like my pay. They were like, we can have volunteer coaching. So I had to find something else.
Mm.
And I needed to find something that was gonna work with what I wanted to do. Like I still wanted to try to volunteer. I still wanted to try to help with rowing. Because I had athletes overnight, rowing's done. And coming from my experience when I got injured, I know what that's like.
Yeah.
And the athletes that I worked with was a demographic where everybody always abandons them.
Mm.
So it's like, I didn't want that to happen to them either.
Right.
So I had to find a night job and they were hiring as a night job. So as a third shift, I worked in aerospace with like military parts for planes. And I like puzzles. It was a lot of math, that type of thing. But it also was out of my normal, I don't know, like occupation that you can say.
Right. Okay.
But OT is an overnight job. not for what I was looking for. You can't coach overnight. And so to find something that allowed me to have the freedom to still do morning lessons with the masters and the adaptive athletes that I was working with, and still have the freedom to do afternoon sessions with the youth that I was still working with while still having income coming in. So that's how
Okay.
I picked up the aerospace. They were definitely sad when I left.
Okay. And that's when you went full-time coaching, rowing?
Down to here to Louisiana.
Okay. Okay. So I'm a little confused. What job is it that you said that you had that dissolved with the DEI? That was
Yeah.
coaching what level?
Mhm. Youth well, so, it was at a facility called Canal Dock Boathouse. They
Okay.
had a youth program called Crew Haven. When after George Floyd, Yale alumni realized, like, Yale is such a prominent rowing team, and they didn't have a youth program that catered or that was designed for the population that was in New Haven where Yale is
Got it.
housed.
Got it.
So, and Yale has only had a handful of Black alumni that have even gone through the whole program. And them being the very first intercollegiate sport in the nation, that's a big deal. So those gentlemen came together and they fundraised, and it was a holistic program where it was 100% free for all high schoolers in the county,
Wow.
and they got free transportation to and from the boathouse. They practice 6 days a week. We partnered with Yale when the housing or not housing, when the food, when they had leftover food after conferences or whatever it may be, brownies, cookies, they would donate it to our club. So the students were able
Wow.
to also bring home sandwiches and different things.
Okay.
And we partnered with other orgs for tutoring. So it was a lot of joint partnerships, diaper bank in the community where all these nonprofits came together. But the central focus was, hey, let's get you working out and moving. And we're doing it on the water.
Okay.
But because with all the federal cuts, we weren't the only one hit. Every
Mm.
program that was working with us was getting hit, or their operation and like the organization had to shut down. So that goes one like leg of our table. There goes another leg of our table. And it got to the point to where we were gonna have to charge students or cut back transportation. And it
Wow.
just got too hard.
Wow. That's so unfortunate.
Hmm.
Due to the changes with the administration, I will say that I do appreciate the fact that U.S. Rowing, even though they may not call it DEI anymore, I don't know if they do or not, but their focus is still on diversity and inclusion. And I
Hmm.
really appreciate that. With you being at a HBCU, how have you seen that be affected by the new administration and the cuts with DEI?
Oh, yeah. So coming in, my contract says things like I have to fundraise a certain amount based off of my budget. And so I went to athletics and I was like, what's my budget? And they're like, we still have to work on it because we've lost lots of grants and federal funding. Grants that went to the tutoring session, that went to like people's salary. Just maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, they laid off a lot of people on campus just to figure out they had to make cuts. And I know Mackenzie Scott, if you're familiar with her, she made a massive donation
Mm.
to Xavier.
Right.
And then the NBA made a donation as well because the first Black NBA player to integrate and receive a contract to the NBA was from Xavier.
Wow. I
So
didn't know
they're
that.
honoring that. And there's 3 individuals. And so 3 HBCUs received money from the NBA.
Okay.
But in terms of, like how does funding affect us? It's hurting an HBCU right now. So, I mean, they're in the middle of, building dorms and renovating buildings, and then all these cuts just happen. So
Mm.
we had our centennial this year, and there was a lot of people coming forward and doing donations and whatnot. It's very, very helpful. But I feel without those massive donations that have come through, it'd be really, really tight.
Wow. Yeah. It's funny because a lot of time, and I don't mean funny as in haha, but a lot of times people don't understand, or because they're not directly affected by these things, they don't think that it's real necessarily. I mean, they believe it,
Hmm.
but it's like, okay, like who is it really hurting? So to hear that, people like at HBCU, they're losing their jobs, they're losing funding
Hmm.
because they try to make it, I've heard, where even the government is giving more money to HBCUs. So you're saying
But
that,
it doesn't fill that gap that was taken, is my
mm,
understanding.
okay.
And a lot of the grants and federal funding they received had mention of DEI or, women or minority. And those were all trigger words that they pulled for funding. So
Mm,
it hit HBCUs a lot harder than it would another larger school too that has a lot of endowments or
right,
funds coming in.
right. That makes sense. Wow. Well, going back to U.S. rowing, I mentioned in your bio also that you did announcing for U.S. rowing at
Mhm.
regattas. How did that come about, and what was that experience like?
Oh yeah. Remember I said I can't stop talking? So um they put a is it like a casting out to see if
Oh,
anybody would be interested for different events, trying to branch out so it wasn't the same individuals doing every
right,
regatta. I mean, think of it like a teacher, some teachers connect more with students, but not with every student. So
right,
to bring more people into the sport, they need different personalities, different people.
right.
So I was able to do the Northeast Youth Championship, and that was fun. So being new to the area, there was a lot of tribal town names and rowing club names, and I was asked, "How do you say this name? How do you say this? What is this?" There was a lot of interesting team names, but
Okay,
I pulled it through. It was fun. Definitely a learning experience. But I mean, I would do it again.
okay,
It's a joy. So I love sharing my love for the sport, and I felt like that's what it was.
okay.
So.
So was it actually commentating as well? Like,
Mhm,
okay, well, this boat is, they're at this 36 stroke rate and
mhm.
oh, look at four seat and you had to do all of that.
Oh, yeah. "Oh, Flo caught a crab," like, talking about and it was me and another individual, and the 2 of us it's like having a conversation like we are now, but we're literally talking about the races in front of us as they're happening, while also educating those that are watching. Like, "This is a 4, this is a coxswain," sweep, sculling, knowing all the terminologies within rowing.
Okay. So you just like, did you have to do an audition?
I had an interview.
Okay.
And so we talked, asked questions. I believe, do I enunciate well? How do
Okay.
I communicate? Just my overall tone. Am I joyful? Am I a drag to talk? So all that. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, you have
Mhm,
coached all athletes at every level. What are some
mhm.
universal truths of rowing that you find yourself teaching no matter what age or experience that you coached?
Yeah. The boat doesn't know what you look like. It doesn't know if you're
Um,
short, if you're tall, if you're tan, if you're pale, if you're blonde, if you're brown eyed. The boat doesn't know.
mhm.
All the boat knows is, are the oars going in here? Are they coming out here? That's it. So anybody that I have come through a boathouse that I've worked with, rowing's not natural. It's something that's learned. So it's going to be hard to break out of what is natural to you. So give yourself grace. You showed up,
Right.
and then same thing too. Try it, have fun. It's not going to be perfect. I was like, you're going to get wet. You're going to get splashed, whatever it
You're
may
gonna
be.
get wet. You're gonna
Yeah.
get wet.
And I told him too, like, probably the hardest part is just carrying the boat to the dock,
Mm.
and once it's in the water, it's from there, we have pontoons you can put on there. We can make it safe and as comfortable as we need it for you. We'll put a life vest if you want one on. There's so many things to make it comfortable. I've had gentlemen like, I have to wear that spandex. I was like, no, like, wear something that's comfortable, but don't wear basketball shorts that are mid calf.
Right.
Like there's different
Right.
and then just I've had all types of body sizes that are like, I don't want to wear a uni. I don't feel comfortable in a uni. Okay, wear a t-shirt. That's fine. So and I only have 2 fingers. How can I hold the oar? Well, that's easy. Let's do this, and like other people have paved a way to get it going. So instead of shying someone away, and I've been lucky enough to every boathouse I've been in, we've been able to provide for each individual that's come through.
That's
We
awesome.
haven't had to turn somebody away because we couldn't offer them something that fit for them.
That's
So
good.
and not every boathouse is that way.
That's
Some
good.
can't do that. So it's been a blessing in disguise that every boathouse I've been to has been able to do that.
Being that you are coaching this co-ed team, how does it I know you said you're not going to like the US regatta, US rowing regattas. What has it been like? Or have you guys actually competed with other colleges that are in your same conference?
Yeah. So Oklahoma City they're also NAIA.
Okay.
And we went to Head of the Oklahoma in October as our first race. And I mean, it's a big race. You can have big names, D1 schools there, but at the
Oh.
same time, they also had programs that were smaller and club level or varsity like we are. So we went against like Oklahoma State, like the clubs teams, the
Mm.
OU club team versus the women's D1. So they got a little taste of what that feels like. And we were middle of the pack. We had a fourth out of fifth place in
Okay.
the women's single. So, and they were exciting. But it was also nerve wracking. Oklahoma
Mm.
City has 10 bridges. It's a huge curve course. We practiced on a straightaway. So
Mm.
they were all nervous and we borrowed boats from other schools. So, lots of nerves, but they did it anyways. And they
Okay.
came out super excited. And probably the most impactful moment, and I can share a photo with you too. We're sitting in our trailer, it's a shaded area. I told them, get out of the sun. Oklahoma's, I told them it's going to be hot. And they're
Mhm.
like, oh, New Orleans is hot. We'll be fine. Oh, no, coach, this is hotter than New Orleans. Like they were like, they were struggling. So they were all in the shade by the trailer, and a little boy walked by. He's probably like 5 or 6, and he's like looking and walking, and I spot him, and I was wondering like, oh, should we say something to him? And he's within like 5 or 6 feet of the trailer as he walks by, and then he disappears behind a boathouse. And I told them, I was like, did you guys see that little boy? He's staring. I was like, he's probably staring because you look like him, and it's something different. Sure enough, like half an hour later, his guardian, who I would assume is his grandma, I could be wrong, but she was holding his hand and brought him up to the team and said that he wanted to tell us something. And so he asked to take a picture with the athletes. And of course, they all got up. They gave him like a visor. They taught him how to do like XU. But he was like, where are you from? Because he's like, I haven't seen you before. And I believe his older sibling rowed, and he's never seen that many people that look like him row. And we weren't even saying anything. Like we were in the shade, out of sight, out of mind, behind a boathouse, nowhere near the race course or launching dock. And one of the students said Xavier in Louisiana, and his grandma was like, oh, do you know where that is? And he was like, no. And she like knelt down to his level and was like, that's a school where they make sure every single boy that looks like you gets an education. And all of us were like, oh my gosh, like the sunscreen is in our eyes, like what's happening? And she's like, can you imagine the whole school? And she's like, and they dance and they sing, but you get your education. And we didn't have to say anything. And that was just like a touching moment from just being to our very first regatta that happened on our very first day. And
Wow.
so things like that is so impactful.
Wow. That is
Hmm.
so awesome.
Yeah.
So
And I can share
touching.
the photo. It's so
Yeah,
cute.
please do.
And then he said, when I get older, I want to row at Xavier. And so we're like, yeah.
That is so
Mhm,
awesome.
mhm,
So that is so awesome. And what that made me think about, because we rode together last
mhm.
summer at, was it Masters? No, it was
And
called
Masters Nat.
Summerfest.
Mhm.
Summerfest or Masters National. And that was really exciting. We rode with Look of Change.
Mhm.
What was that experience like? What have you experienced as far as when you were rowing? What was the population like, of your teammates?
When I started rowing, the program at the time, I think, was like 15 because we were able to take a 15-person van to regattas when I was in middle school. I mean, that included like everybody was juniors and seniors. I was the
Okay.
youngest on the team by a long shot. But the whole coaching staff, they all look the same. No one looked like me on the team. They're all affluent. I was lucky enough that my parents were able to work hard to provide that scholarship or like that tuition, but it wasn't easy. And
Mhm.
some of them, it was pocket change, like
Mm.
majority of the students on the team. So going to regattas, my mom would be like, hey, like you need to work hard because it costs us to send you to these races. When other athletes I was with, it was like a vacation. They were excited to get out of there. I never really saw a lot of diversity within the high school program that I was on, probably one or two the whole like 5 years I was there from middle
Mhm.
school through senior. But whenever I came back to volunteer and coach, there was a little bit more diversity there and just across all socioeconomic and all backgrounds, religion, everything.
Mhm.
Um, and then I was lucky enough to like Kevin Harris, who's a well-known coach, and mentor and rower in the United States. He was a head coach at Tulsa. So he was one of the first, if not the first, collegiate coach I've ever met in rowing. So for
Mm.
me, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was rare. because I learned how to row in Tulsa and he was coaching a collegiate team in Tulsa. I didn't realize the rarity until I went to college on a D1 level and I was like, whoa, like what's going like the team's larger. There's like 60 to 80 and there's only 2 of us on the team. And lo and behold, like I went to speak with the other individual on the team and I ended up joining her sorority, and we got like so we bonded in that sense too. But yeah, there was only 2 on the University of Oklahoma when I joined there. And then the first time I saw an all Latina boat is when I went to San Diego Crew Classic
Mm.
and they had a team from Mexico come up. And I was like, whoa, they look just, and they're my height. We're all like 5'5", 5'6". I was like, this is nice. And not only that, but they held their own against Cal and Washington. I was like,
Mm.
"Whoa." And Texas, I think that was the 4 or 5 in that event. And it wasn't like they were way over here and all the other teams were there. Like they were all boom, boom, boom. So that made me feel good as well to see Latina women being powerful. And then just going to conferences, like you and I have been to conferences before, a women's coaching. Uh, oh, no, you're good. But you and I have been in like coaching conferences. There's a women's coaching conference and just seeing there, I mean, we draw into each other, and or even going to a conference next week. So rowing is large, but it's also small at the same time. Like there's
Yep.
still
Yeah.
lots and lots of growth and room for improvement. I mean,
Mhm.
rowing's the first intercollegiate sport in the US, and why am I the first HBCU men and women's rowing program in 2025? There's
Right.
still lots of firsts happening.
Crazy.
Yeah, but it's and transitioning because I did high school my whole life, high school
Mhm.
coaching. So I realized, the most beautiful thing is growing Brick City Rowing. There's so many like youth programs, and POCOC, US Rowing, all these programs are building into youth programming, and I'm seeing that
Right.
expansion. But then someone asked me, because Xavier asked me maybe 2 years ago to come down here. And I said, no, no, like that's not where I wanted to be at that time.
Mhm.
But then someone asked me, you have so much passion for youth rowing, but what happens after they graduate high school? What if
Mm.
they want to stay in that same atmosphere? What collegiate program can you say offers that same atmosphere? And I was like,
Mm.
ooh, like, so that's when I reached out to Xavier. And this was, I want to say, the beginning of this past summer. And I
Mhm.
told them, "Hey, I know it's not ideal, but I can be down there in January of 2026." And it was one of those things, can you be here within the month? Yeah. And so I was able to work it out and come down here. But my first day that I literally drove in with my U-Haul was the first day of class. So I had to play catch up and all that stuff too. But I don't know, that's a long story short. I never really saw people like me in the sport. And coming from a small private school, a private Christian school too, it gave me an opportunity as someone who's queer to also not shy away from who I was. Because the high school I went to, I would have been expelled if I came out wholeheartedly of who I was. So
Mm.
to see that, you're battling those internal things as a youth, as a mind, and seeing, oh, these parents said it was okay, or this school says it's okay, and then just branching out within the club because we had 18 different schools in the high school team. It also made me realize, hey, this is okay. And then also this isn't right. So let's make it okay. So making sure that any boathouse I'm in, everybody feels welcome. If I see someone quiet, I go up and talk to them, make sure that
Right.
they have a buddy on the team and that they can wholeheartedly be themselves. Because
Yeah.
if you're hiding something, or if you're ashamed, or if you're embarrassed, or if you're afraid, that also shows in your power and your speed. You can't
Mhm.
let all those shackles drop and be full power unless you actually like open up. So I want
Right.
everybody to know it's a safe space.
Right. I love that. I coach middle school, and one of the things that I was really, really intentional about this year is making sure that the team was cohesive and felt like a family and felt like everybody
Mhm.
included. And we had our last practice on Friday, and we went around and just talked about what they like best about the season and kind of reflected on what they want to pass on to also what they wanted to pass on to the next group of kids that come in the spring. And there was one girl that transferred from another club in Dallas. And she was like, one of the things that she was nervous about was that she had a lot of friends at the other club. When she came here, she thought everybody was going to be kind of cliquish and already friends. And she was like, I've never not felt included. And I was like, that made me feel so good because I was intentional about the way that we started our practice with icebreakers and having everybody talk to different people and not those same group of, people that already know each other. So I love that, making the boathouse feel inclusive at all times. And does take intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about saying that, you were the only one like all throughout college and everything. How do you, I know you said that 27 people reached out to you. You didn't think you were going to recruit there, but
Yeah.
how do you, or what do you think is the best way to recruit kids from, let's say, even from school to a club or from middle school to high school? Because something that I was on United We Rose online conference last week,
Mm-hmm.
you were there too. And when the Positive Coaching Alliance was doing a session and they were saying something about like, what are some of the obstacles? What are some of the challenges for people getting to the boathouse? And I was like, oh, for years I talked about transportation. And then I thought about it and I was talking to a friend of mine and he was like, you know what? You guys just don't make rowing look fun. And I was like, wow. So what is it that we could do to help kids understand like, oh, you'll meet some of your best friends, you'll have fun, you'll travel,
Mm-hmm.
and like really for them to see it and for it to look inviting.
Mm-hmm. Something that I've learned through my career is you have two groups of people in your program. When you have experienced people, you have higher expectations. And the
Mhm.
workouts, they know how to warm up, they know how to do everything. And then you have new people coming in, and there should be no expectations. It should all be 100% belonging. And
Mm.
because you want them to stay. So it's all about safety, belonging, and just getting the feel and the comfortability of everything. Don't push expectations right out the door or they're going to be overwhelmed. It's lots of new
Right.
things. It's not natural. So when I bring someone new, I had the 27 interests mainly because they saw what the other athletes were doing. So your
Mhm.
best way of recruitment is your current athletes. They're going to get their friends from school. And if it happens to, oh, let's carpool together because we go to the same school, you start getting that type of like communication.
Right.
Here in Louisiana on the collegiate level, do you have gators? Yes, we have gator, and well, I can't go in that water. There's gators in the water, and I'll admit, like the first time I went on the water and I shone the light in the morning and I saw the eyes, that's kind of nerve wracking, but they disappear. Like they see the boat and they go bye bye. But I had to include in my handbook, safety precautions with alligators, and that's something that I've never had to do before. But we're also not the only program that rows in water that has gators. There's Florida teams as well and whatnot. So I was able to reach out to them and they're like, honestly, like they're more afraid of the boat and those oars flopping around than anything. And just making sure that if you have a smaller boat with somebody who's a little uncomfortable in it, the launch is right there. So if anything happens, boom, it's quick. You're not even in the water that often or that long of a time period. You don't have to worry about swimming to shore or whatever it may be. But the other thing too, and being on a collegiate level, coming from club, they had to provide transportation for themselves. Now we're varsity. Now I could use university shuttles. Now I can get
Mm.
just get to campus and we'll transport you to and from the boathouse. But if
Okay.
you miss the shuttle, like that's all up to you. Like the shuttle leaves right at this time. So it took them about a month and some of them are still figuring it out. If I say the shuttle leaves at 5:10, it's pulling out at 5:10, not 5:12. So
Right.
they're starting to learn time management with that sense as well. But the first few weeks, about half the team was missing the shuttle because they
Oh,
didn't think I
wow.
was serious with it's going to leave right at this time. So because we weren't the only person that driver was responsible for, they were
Right.
picking up other people as well. We were just one of the stops along the way. So if we held her up, it held up everybody else for the rest of the day.
Mm.
Swimming is a big one. And just statistically with the demographics at HBCU, I knew people aren't going to be able to all know how to swim. And we provide low profile life vests, so it's not embarrassing to wear like the cruise
Mm.
ship, big bulky ones. And then along those lines, if you have an on your own workout in the afternoon, I told them if you're not comfortable swimming, there's a local pool, a city pool, and all Xavier students get free access to their swim lessons, their water aerobics. So I
Oh,
said your
wow.
on your own can count as a swim lesson, or your on your own can count as water aerobics, where you're just kicking with a like a kickboard and just
Right.
getting more comfortable in the water. So that's something that we're incorporating over winter and into the spring that we weren't able to do necessarily this fall. But on your own, providing opportunities where they can get comfortable in a safe space with lifeguards around, preferably someone who's not part of the team. So it's different eyes.
Mm,
And all those opportunities are expanding and bringing more
that's
people.
awesome.
The
Yeah.
ones that wanted to come, they were like, "Ooh, like, this looks really nice." But I always have to tell them it's challenging. Rowing's not easy. I mean, you can pick it up, but if you wanna stay on this team, it's hard. We practice early and we practice hard. It's
Hmm.
not gonna be a walk in the park type of thing. So and out of those 27, I believe it was, like, 9 that were solid that I invited to come onto the team. Whether it
Awesome.
was grades or, injuries, but I told the other ones, "Try out in January. I might do something in
Mhm.
January." Really, really important that if you do have to turn someone away, or if they're not ready, you don't just say, "No, you're not good enough,"
Right. Mhm.
Provide them the resources because you can compile those resources in advance and then just have them ready,
Right.
and anytime you need to send them out, send them out. Like, use the tutoring resources on campus, whatever it may be. Let's get that grade up, and then we'll have another conversation, because there's minimum GPAs in college that they have to maintain.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And then some of them, HBCU is huge with Greek life, the
Right.
Divine Nine, learning here that they pledge in the fall, and so I told them from the get go, if you plan on pledging, you better let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to think you're lazy, you're missing practice, you're not taking care of yourself because you get sleep deprived through that whole process. And I told them if it means you take the fall semester off, you take the fall semester off, and let's think about it
Mm.
in the spring. Because anything you put your mind to and your name to, you need to be able to give it wholeheartedly. Don't give 10% here, 5% here, 50% here. Like, your name should be important to you and your character. And if you sign up to do something, I want you to do it. So I'm just teaching them how to balance their plate too. So
Right.
I had a few cross this fall. We had a Zeta and a Delta cross. The team was
Hey, my
ecstatic. They had
friends.
no idea. Yeah. They had no idea. Their names were called at the neophyte show. It was insane. And they were like, "What? Coach, did you know?" And I was like, "I knew, but I couldn't say anything."
We had someone cross this year
Yeah.
like that.
We had 2 ladies cross this fall, and there was a neophyte show. And this school, and it's the first time I've ever seen it done this way.
Uh-huh.
At my school, like, okay, the Qs had a night and they did their show or whatever it may be. The Deltas had their night. But here they did everybody on the same night. The
Oh,
doors opened
wow.
at 4 and it started at like 6. And the line out the door started at 4. So to get in for a show that started at 6. Yeah. And it was in the basketball arena. So
Yeah.
when they called the names and you heard like our rowers' names, everybody was like, "What?" And it was exciting. The team was all supportive. Those ladies came back super powerful, super strong. And then you just feel like that uplift, like, "Hey, I did it." And I told
Right.
them they stuck through the whole team too. They didn't take a break in the fall.
Oh,
So
wow.
they raced at regattas, they made it to practices, they kept their grades up. And I was like,
Wow.
that takes a lot of kudos. So I had to
It
give
sure
praise where
does.
praise was, yeah. Yeah, and I told them, "Take advantage of, like, this break time, Thanksgiving and
Right.
winter."
Right. 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 So I'm gonna ask you two questions. One, you said something about people invite their friends. Did you ever have a problem or inviting any of your friends or family? Like, did you recruit people that you knew that looked like you to row?
Yeah. It wasn't till my senior year in high school.
Okay.
I went to a small private school, but my friends that would have been thinking about it were already playing, like, four-letter sports at the high school. Like, they did
Okay.
every single sport as the season went through, and so they're like,
Okay.
"Yeah, parents aren't gonna let me stop these 4 sports just to do
Mm,
rowing." And rowing was hard to push because it's year round. So, very
mhm.
few programs only allow you to be in the spring or only in the fall. Most of
Right.
them
Right.
put you have to be here the whole year. So, we had 2 new students, I believe my junior year, and they saw me, I was like, "Hey, I gotta go." I gotta go to practice. I didn't stay behind after school to chat with other people or like go to the movies or whatever it may be. I had practice.
Okay.
And she was like, "Hey, can I, is there a learn to row or anything?" I invited her. I was like, "Yeah, carpool with me." And she signed
Okay.
up. So she
Okay.
was part of the novice team when I was on the varsity. So our paths never really crossed that often.
Mm,
But I took her to practice and her parents picked her up after practice. And we had
awesome.
classes every day together.
Okay. And the second question related to something that you said, how far is the boathouse from Xavier?
We lucked out. It's about 10, 15 minutes, depending on
Okay.
how many red lights you hit. New Orleans, it's a lot of narrow streets and a lot of stoplights. So I
Mhm.
want to say it's only 3 miles or something like that from
Okay.
campus. But to get there with all the stops and goes and avoiding potholes in the streets here, yeah, that's a thing down here.
Right.
um, 10, 15 minutes. And then
Okay.
Tulane rows about 2 miles east of us. So
Oh,
there's 2
okay.
separate waterways that there's rowing here in New Orleans.
Okay. And you guys are partnered with a club rowing team?
Mhm.
Club? Boathouse?
Yeah, so when we were initially a club before varsity, the only reason we were able to get our feet moving is because we partner with New Orleans Rowing Club. So
Okay.
they provided boats, a dock, Beth Manley, who helped found this program. She was a master there. She's also the secretary on their board.
Mm.
She's the one that reached out to our Shea Cooper. She reached out to Concept 2. She reached out to all these grants, the Gold Cup grant, all these
Okay.
opportunities to bring the equipment in, to bring boats, to bring oars, to bring funding. New Orleans Rowing Club, NORC, basically provided that in the meantime. And now that we're a varsity, we're transitioning to getting out from under that umbrella and now providing our own insurance for our boats, providing our own titles, so we actually own the equipment that was donated to us. And
Oh,
that
that's
takes
so
time. So like a 2 to
right.
3 year type plan. But if it wasn't for New Orleans Rowing Club, this program wouldn't exist at all.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Well, now turning the spotlight back on you as an athlete.
Mhm.
How would you or when would you say that you were in your elevated flow state, whether it's just in, self-care or being a coach or being an athlete? At what time do you feel like you're in your elevated flow state?
Mhm. No, there's been some tough times throughout like my rowing career. I told you like I had to stop competing on a D1 level in college. So that
Mhm.
like hit me. Is like how do I revamp from that?
Right.
But something that out of all the challenges I face, probably the hardest and something that made me revamp and rethink and look from different points of views is when I did a 88-kilometer ocean race.
Mm.
It was an endurance race, and that was with allies with oars, a
Mhm.
state group, and, I wanna say it was 12 hours where you're out there, but it's one of those things where you're just going, and then you get in this sync, but then you also have in your mind, like, "Okay, you're crazy. Why did you do this?" type of
Right.
thing, but my athletes saw me training for it. Oh, and that
Mm.
big. They saw me show up early. I was training before their practices, and then I was training after their practices. They saw my Instagram stories, like, on my coaching profile. They were following they saw how I was practicing different maneuvers out on the water, with different waves, and how am I gonna do this, and how I
Mm.
got Ocean Shell, a coastal boat at our boathouse, and now they're like, "Can we try this coastal boat?" We
Oh.
had a coastal quad that was there, but that was probably one of the hardest mental things I've ever done in my life, but to know that, I had the support of my athletes and my family, and the reason why I was doing it is to diversify rowing in a sport in the sense of trans athletes, to bring awareness to trans athletes in rowing. So every single person in our team was queer identifying or an ally or trans themselves. So that flow of just it made me remember all my whys. So
Mm.
it's so easy to just go like, "Yeah, I have a car that works and I'm able to pay for gas." But until you're, like, in the middle of the ocean with nothing else to think about, you start remembering all the pros in your life, and you realize you're not alone, actually.
Mm.
So, just to get that nice, like, "Hey, yes, you're out there with nothing in the ocean, but you have a family that loves you. You have these youth that look up to you. You have these youth on the rowing team that actually push hard to and work hard. You have parents from the youth that are like, 'How can we volunteer?' You have a boathouse, you have boats, you have all this thing," and it was a really moving time. And then of course
Wow.
you like get out of the boat at the end of it and you're like, wow, I can't stand up. But you didn't
Right.
know that as you were going through the whole process. But because of that time through that ocean row, that endurance row, it was called Race Around the Rock. It was in
That was you
British.
were, Tara was you were in the boat
Yeah,
with Tara. Okay, yeah, we
yeah,
coached
yeah. So
together
all
in
this, yeah.
Craftsbury last year. Okay.
Yeah. So, but going through that, now it's easy for me to find my why. And because I know
Mm,
my whys with everything that I do, it's easy to get into that flow state.
wow.
So without that why, you're kind of just like chaos. And
I love
so
that.
that's long story short. But
I love that. I love that. And you know what? I get a glimpse of that with just being on the water, you know?
mhm.
So I can only imagine what it was like. What did you say? 13?
Yeah, they used 12. There was a all male identifying boat. I think they finished in 9 hours. And then
Mm,
our boat was mixed and it was 12 hours.
okay.
So
Yeah. I
mhm,
can imagine. That's beautiful. All right.
mhm,
Well, now we're going to move into our last section of the podcast, and it's called Passing the Torch. So, you
mhm,
have already, just based on your 20 plus years of coaching, passed the torch in many ways. You worked in middle school, high school. Now you're working on the collegiate level. You also said you work with masters. So, I'm going to ask the question a little bit differently than I ask most of my guests. You are literally building a blueprint for future HBC rowing programs, which hopefully that'll help this university. What message do you want to pass to the next generation of coaches and athletes who may not see themselves in the sport?
mhm. Make sure that you find support with someone who sees you wholeheartedly as who you are. Whether that's an advisor, whether it's a GA, whether it's somebody else on the team, you need to make sure that you have at least one person that sees that and that can vouch and remind you of that. Because it's so easy, especially on a collegiate program where scholarships are involved, that code switching can happen, that people can
Oh,
switch and figure if that means I'm going to get money, I'm going to say I'm this. But at the same time, as an HBCU, there's no other team that looks like us.
right.
There's no other, we had our centennial or 100-year homecoming this past like month or at the beginning of November. Hey coach, I just spent $400 on my hair. I don't want to get it wet. How many rowing programs can say that that was a big thing? Or
Right.
I just sat for 5 hours and I got my hair braided and I can't let it do this or this? So, and then just learning every single one of them is wearing a scarf or a bonnet or a swim cap to practice. Okay, let's make that part of our gear. So give them an opportunity.
Wow.
So like getting a scarf or something, or it's a trend to have braids past your butt. I'm like, you can't do that on this rowing team. So all those different things and different barriers that I'm not used to, or ow. And I'm like, what do you mean, ow? The handle got stuck on their body beads, their waist beads. So learning different things like that. And then they want to do like team bonding and make team waist beads. And the guys can have anklets. And so, or learning all the music in New Orleans is NOLA bounce. It's all twerk music. So I see them do a hard erg piece, and I'm used to athletes just falling off the erg with their feet still attached, and their shoes are there. My athletes like hover over the seat and twerk, and then they're like, okay, I'm done, and like they're just excited that they did something new and it's all foreign to them. But I coming from an HBCU, any coach that goes into it, you don't want to take away who they are. Have them
Mm,
keep that identity, have them keep that personality, because that's what makes them who they are. And that's what differentiates your program from another program. And I think that's important. So I let them do their little twerking. I let them do their chants and all that stuff. And I tell them you're a representation of the university. So as long as it's modest in a sense that also is what draws attention to us when we're doing our like chants on the shoreline. People are like, "Oh, that's different." They're stomping and clapping and all, yeah. We did headshots and I asked one of the AKAs on the team, "Hey, why don't you do your hand sign?" "Oh, I can do that with the oar." I'm like, "Yeah." And so it became like a nice headshot. She had a boat on her shoulder and was doing her hand sign. And so then all the other AKAs were like commenting and resharing that post and that's what's important. I want people to see themselves in our athletes. And
right.
there are little kids and there are high schoolers, there are older individuals who look down and see, like, I wish I had, and
Mm,
maybe that can be an inspiration for them to start as an adult. Because rowing, you can be any age. really to get in the boat. So
And that's the next point, passing the torch up, passing it up. What would you say to an older person that's looking at them and saying, "Oh, I wish I had that. Oh, I'm too old. It's too late
Mhm.
to
It's
start
never too
rowing."
late. So,
Right,
I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, the hardest part is getting that boat to the water, but depending on the club you're with, have more hands on it. They'll make a
right.
way. If you really wanna show up and get it, that boat will be in the water for you.
Yeah.
And it's good, you're getting up and down every single day, in and out of that boat. Those are movements that are gonna take you, like, your lifetime. I joke because, I've asked, like, people have asked me before, like, "What do you dread when you get older?" And I love painting and I love hiking. And, like, Frida Kahlo is known for, like, getting her hands started shaking as she was getting older, so her artwork didn't become as crisp. And I was
Mm.
like, "I'm gonna be devastated the time when I can't do a straight line anymore," or, like,
Oh,
do, like,
no.
the paints. And then I said, "Also, I'm gonna be devastated if I'm going hiking and I can't go to the bathroom in the woods because I can't squat anymore." So, making sure that I'm staying active, all those little things, like, you have
Right,
to find your why. And it's like, I eventually want my own family. I wanna be able to bend over and pick up, my child or whatever it may be. So it's all about longevity. It's not about perfect and perfection. It's just, are you moving? Are you staying active? Is it something
right.
you enjoy? So it may not be rowing, but if it is, that's something that's low impact. And water to me is healing, it's therapy. It doesn't always have to
Absolutely.
be, let's get a gold medal. That's not for
Right.
everybody.
Right.
But mhm.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I have certainly enjoyed this conversation and we could talk for hours because I have a whole bunch of other stuff that I want to ask you, but I'm going to respect your time. I'll see you next weekend. So we'll have a little bit more time to chat up too. And I'll have to
Yeah.
bring you back on. But where can people follow you online?
It's XULA, Zula Rowing, and that's gonna be where you can see everything that we're doing here with HBCU. And I mean, they highlight like me going to the conference next week and different things as
Oh, okay.
well. But in terms of what I'm doing in rowing, that's gonna be your best bet to follow through.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tamara, for coming on. I certainly have enjoyed our conversation. Until next time, this is Coach Flo signing off. Remember to find your zone and elevate your
One, two,
flow.